Let's go back for a second talking about Jesus and his
Yes.
influence on the West and the idea that Paul, who never really met Jesus, is responsible for how we see Jesus' word being interpreted and understood now. How did it get to be that way?
Yeah.
Where there were Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and there were people who traveled and lived with Jesus and were part of his flock. So, at what point does the purity of Jesus' word now become interpreted by Paul, whose interpretation is only structured in his own ability to understand wherever he ingested this understanding of Christianity in the eyes of the Lord, so to speak.
Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. So the idea that you're talking about, if I could just kind of sum it up, is how did this happen? How did this idea, these concepts of Paul over time get incorporated into what we see now as Jesus' teaching? And where did that go awry, so to speak, and how did that happen, basically, right?
Yeah, because people think that the Word of God is the Word of God. They don't say it's the Word of Paul. They
Right.
said Jesus said blah, blah, blah. Or
Right.
Matthew, Corinthians or whatever. So it's all, people are, whether they're blindly following, which
Sure.
I think a lot of people do.
Sure.
Not many people really study the Word of God. Probably there are some pastors and then people stand up and praise Jesus and they do study. But why, how did it come to be?
So most of the people, how did this happen, as you say? And most of the people who claim to study the history of this, most of those people from a religious standpoint are studying the Bible. So they're studying the Bible, they're not studying the history of the Bible and how the Bible was made. So the Bible was made by a collection of views and opinions by many, 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 many people. And Tabor talks about that in his book in detail. So I don't want to get into all the detail of that, but the bottom line is, because I'm not an expert. Tabor's an expert. He did an incredible historical analysis, and he and other historians should be given credit for that. But I'll just tell you in summation, it's a collection of a lot of views of a lot of people. There are a lot of, not just Paul, but after Paul, and there were other issues, which there were political issues and so forth and so on. But what I can talk about, and what I'd like to talk about is, what I remember about being with Jesus, because those are memories that I have on a personal level of having been with him and walking with him and talking with him. And I think what's really gets lost in the whole mix, because remember, what's Paul, let's just real quickly, first of all, this whole Jesus being God thing, Jesus never said he was God. He never said he was God. Somebody conflated that and made that up along the way. Jesus was a teacher. He was a great teacher. He was an incredible man living on earth at that time. His mind or his spirit, his soul, his mind continues now and is very active. But he was not God. He spoke about his father, Jehovah, and it wasn't his literal father. He was a fatherly figure to him, Jehovah. But the other key thing I think about Paul's teaching, before I get into what I remember about being with Jesus, is that Paul's teaching about just all you have to do is believe, and you believe that supposedly Jesus died on the cross to dispense with everybody's sins as long as you believe. There's a very easy way out for people. And it's understandable why people would find that attractive. But was that something that Jesus ever said? I don't remember him ever saying anything remotely like that.